All this time you've been hearing the music in total darkness, and it was meant to be played in the presence of a large curtain of rarichs. And this curtain depicted an ancient man playing a primitive wind instrument, while to one side a group of figures dressed as stags were dancing very slowly. And now the lights come up and we see the mystic circles of young girls working out just which among them will be the chosen maiden. From time to time, one or another of them falls out of the design until all at once it becomes absolutely clear who is the chosen one. And at exactly that moment, Stravinsky shifts the orchestration over to the brass in this kind of musical exclamation point. And then very slowly, the brass take us back to those throbbing chords of the very first dance of the piece, made much more violent by the presence of very loud percussion, suggesting death, 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 death.
And it's as loud as we can play, 11 notes in a row, with no other intent but to be scary.
Again, this music has become a series of gestures, not so much melodies. It's kind of... This is the most savage music we've heard yet, the glorification of the chosen one. We just feel in our own bodies the head twists, the body snaps, the falling down, the throbbing beat, which is shifting around in ways that make no rational sense. And once this gets into your ears and into your body, you can never forget it. Where is all this violent music taking us? To another moment of absolute joy. You can't hear this music as anything else but a joyous affirmation of the past, the present, and the future. Stravinsky even suggested the music he wrote for 5 bassoons was an evocation of 5 old village elders intoning the last of the prayers.
As things die down right before the sacrificial dance, the bass clarinet sort of erupts and bubbles once again. I think of it as sort of like, if you're thinking the Rite as being very earthy, it's sort of a like a sort of a lava kind of bubbly thing.
Now, those last few notes that Ben played, that boop, 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 is the introduction to the actual sacrificial dance. Stravinsky played this piece on the piano as a kind of improvisation for a long time, and he couldn't imagine how he could write this down.
This is one of the parts where Stravinsky had a difficult time notating the piece, and I think it posed a lot of challenges for him. It's a sound that he had no conventional way of really expressing.
He felt the rhythms so powerfully in his body, the rhythms he imagined it would be wrenching and contorting and snapping the neck and motivating the jumps. But he could not imagine how it could be written down. It seemed so chaotic. And yet there is a design. It's a design of very simple musical gestures arranged in a very cunning way. Now listen in slow motion what they are. The simplest is just an alternating on-beat and snappy off-beat. But you notice that the double basses play the first downbeat, and the timpani plays the next downbeat, and that dialogue is what bumps it up. Let's do that once more. Now, the next part of it is a masterfully placed silence, followed by an exaggerated crescendo by brass instruments. There we go. And the last is 3 consecutive short notes played by strings and winds. So you got that? The first one is the second one is and the last one is And this pattern, which repeats many times, sometimes with a couple more bars, sometimes with a couple less bars, is what gives that inevitable but kind of wonderfully off-kilter feeling. And then comes a contrasting section, which, although quiet, is absolutely insistent in reaffirming the groove. And staying locked into that groove causes the orchestra inevitably to accumulate towards one of those huge Stravinsky noises. From here on out, it's a kind of take-no-prisoners game of cutting and pasting between these wild elements until the old team, low brass and percussion, bring in the rhythm that's going to take us home. Now, throughout this whole Rite of Spring, I think you've been hearing that the timpani is one of the most important instruments in the orchestra. In fact, the whole bass line is vitally important here. And timpani, double basses, tuba, trombones, all have to be hugely aware of one another to keep the piece on course. But timpani is very often the front edge of all of this. And I want to introduce to you our timpanist, David Herbert, who can give us a really great insight on how this all works. David.
Since the timpani are drums, real drums like we have over here, but they actually play notes, musical pitches. Stravinsky was very clever to combine the power of the drums with the musical pitches of the bass instruments. Playing this last page of the Rite of Spring is so much fun. My piece of the puzzle is not to play where everybody else in the symphony orchestra is playing. For instance, if I were to play my part in the left hand and I'll play the orchestra's part in my right hand, you'll see what I mean.
The timpani and the bass drum in the Rite of Spring have a fairly intimate connection. The timpanist is the star. The bass drum is the supporting cast. We work together quite a bit.